So I'm 𝗕𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗃 and we're in the distillery at Somerset Cider Brandy. The Somerset Cider Brandy Company was established in 1989. Before that, my mother and father had a museum licence, and Somerset Cider Brandy is something that's always been made in the UK, in Somerset, around here, and it disappeared from the records for about 300 years as we became really puritanical. And so the Somerset Cider Brandy Company has essentially, for the past 35 years, has been reviving this ancient craft of Somerset cider brandy production. And these are our stills, Josephine, Fifi and Isabel. So we make a 3-year-old Somerset cider brandy, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old and a 20-year-old cider brandy. And we would be the equivalent of a 𝗕𝗲𝘆𝗀𝗍𝗄 in France, whom we have very good relations with. And the cider brandy that comes off this farm finds its way all over the world, and it's really sharing the magic and mystery of our ancient orchards. So we have a book called Treatise of Cider, which was 1678, and it talks about cider brandy production in the UK during that time, and then with increased taxes, cider brandy production would have gone underground. And actually, when the Somerset Cider Brandy Company was established, we actually suddenly realised that lots of people had stills in their back room. So cider brandy production in the UK has never totally disappeared. It just went underground, and as a commercial enterprise, we're re-establishing it. The process of Somerset Cider Brandy, you use the best cider. You can't use bad cider. We often get asked to distill bad cider for people. That's absolutely the wrong ethos. You have to use the best cider because any faults in your cider will be magnified. Your cider must be completely pure, 100% apples, and we only use apples from traditional tall orchards. We think the quality is better. So these standard orchards, they take a lot longer to mature, but actually the light can get all around the tree, so you get a better quality fruit. And it's low intensity, so no insecticides or artificial nitrogen needs to be used. So the best cider comes in here, no sulfites, no nothing added, and when it's dry, it gets fed into the stills, and these are continuous stills, which each one of those plates in the stills is a distillation plate, and so it's distilled, and what you get coming out the side is a 70% pure apple spirit. And because of the nature of these stills, it retains a huge amount of the fruit, much more so than a pot still would retain. And that spirit then goes off into barrels, and there's small oak barrels, and after 3 years in a small oak barrel of continuous aging, it can be considered a cider brandy. So when the spirit comes off here at 70%, that spirit is known as eau-de-vie, and eau-de-vie is a term for any fruit distillate. So you could even have an apple eau-de-vie. We make a pear eau-de-vie also, but any distilled fruit wine, a cider, would be an eau-de-vie initially. So eau-de-vie is an amazing product in its own right. It's just pure apple or pear spirit when it comes off these stills, and it's fresh, it's fruity, it's drunk a lot more in Europe. Eau-de-vie is not known so well in the UK as a product category, but people drink it like a vodka. You would drink it on its own, and you can also use it in the cocktail market. It's really important. So when you put the 70% eau-de-vie into barrels and it stays in the barrels for up to 20 years in our case, you actually lose spirit content. And what's known in the bonded warehouse where we keep all the barrels, you'll have an incredible smell, and that's the angel share. So the spirit evaporates out of the barrels 2 to 4% a year. If you're lucky, your barrel doesn't also leak. And what that does is the spirit picks up lots of tannins, lots of flavour compounds from the wood, from the oak, and it also is losing its more volatile elements. So the spirit becomes more rounded, it becomes what we call fatter, and it becomes softer. So a young spirit will always be quite spirituous or fiery, and then as you get older and older, it becomes much smoother, softer, rounded. Brandy, Somerset Cider Brandy is aged eau-de-vie, and the barrels are hugely important in what we do here, and they're predominantly European oak, and some of them will have had a life before us. We use some new barrels. Over there, we're just processing some Somerset oak to make Somerset oak barrels. We just have to dry it for 3 years before we can start the process of making the barrels. And we're actually planting an oak wood here. And in 130 years' time, we will start harvesting that wood for Somerset oak barrels. So it's a long process. We've already pre-planned our orchards that we don't expect to be harvesting till 2040, and then the spirit that we see from that will be selling in the 2050s. Somerset Cider Brandy is made out of at least 20 apple varieties, and they are traditional Somerset apple varieties. A lot of them originated just around this area, and when we put the brandy down into barrels, we're constantly tasting it to see if it needs to move barrels, to see if it's going in the right direction. And then when we come to blending the brandy at the very end, we sometimes choose multiple barrels to go together and make the perfect blend. And sometimes you get such an amazing barrel, you'll bottle it as a single cask. But every barrel gets tasted numerous times throughout its life just to make sure it's aging in the right trajectory. As well as the Somerset Cider Brandy, we also make something which we call Somerset Pomona and something that we call 𝗕𝗲𝗆𝗄𝗃. And these are not full-strength spirits. They are fortified juices in the same way that sherry or a port would be a fortified juice. And the 𝗕𝗲𝗆𝗄𝗃 is light and fresh. It's a blend of a young Somerset Cider Brandy with the juice of the Kingston Black Apple. It's all left to marry for a couple of years, and then it's bottled at 18%. So it's light and fresh and fruity, and it really talks about the Kingston Black orchards. Kingston Black is a bitter, sharp apple, and so it has an incredible mouthfeel. Somerset Pomona is similar, but it's something that's been aged for 2 years in oak, and from the oak, it's an ex-cider brandy barrel it's been aged in, so it's picked up a bit of strength. It's also picked up a hint of almonds that it gets from this sitting in the barrel for the 2 extra years, and it's thicker, it's a bit more oxidized, and it sits on the table in the same way that a port would sit on the table. It's great with cheese. It's really good married with another great food industry of Somerset, which is the cheddar cheesemakers, and that's a really popular product that finds its way all over. It's much more accessible because it's not a full-strength spirit. From this farm, our products find themselves all over. Really huge use in the cocktail market, both the brandies and the Somerset Pomona and the 𝗕𝗲𝗆𝗄𝗃. We also find them being used by lots of chefs. We're never quite sure how things get there. The Somerset Pomona finds itself at 𝗏𝗏, or did when 𝗏𝗏 was open in Copenhagen. We're not sure how any of these things find their themselves in different countries and different restaurants being used for all sorts of incredible purposes, but they do seem to find their way out of our orchards and all over. We sell a little bit in Japan, we sell a little bit in California, we sell quite a lot in Europe, and we're always amazed at what people send us. I think for us it's a real pride of seeing where our orchards find themselves. So apple-based spirits are a really wonderful category. They have a definite place on any menu, and they sit alongside your more common brandies, your cognac, your armagnac, and I think for us, what's so important about Somerset Cider Brandy is that the apple must always be present, which is why we stop aging at 20 years, because after 20 years, you have a danger of losing your apple content and becoming over-oaked. And we're all about elevating the apple. And for us, our products hopefully sit at the beginning of the menu, with your cheese board at the end of the menu as a digestif, and then also in cocktails. And I think Somerset Cider Brandy, when it first started, my father started it, he would describe it almost as a vanity project, but I would say that actually it was more out of interest. He has a complete passion for orchard techniques and for the apples of this area, which is really the heart of Ciderland in the UK. And he couldn't have possibly imagined that an industry would have arisen from what started as a hobby production, really. And he really started because everyone from across the world, when they'd come to the farm, they'd say, why don't you distill? Because everyone else with apple traditions, everyone else across the world, they have a great current distilling culture. And it stemmed from there, and there should always be a place for apple distillate on the menu. If you don't like cider, don't be put off by Somerset Cider Brandy, because there's no reference in your taste to cider. It comes from the apples, it's distilled cider, but in the same way a normal brandy doesn't taste anything like wine. It's exactly the same. That. If you like a young, fresh spirit, try the 5-year-old. The 5-year-old smells like the blossom in spring in the orchards. It's really floral, it's really fruity, it's very elegant for a 5-year-old spirit. And the 10-year-old is more of an after-dinner spirit. It's our flagship. It's much spicier, it's more grown up. It is quite complex. And then the 15-year-old has a slightly different, it's more like the 5-year-old, and it's very elegant and delicate. It is very refined. And the 20-year-old is something really special. It's got, as I think someone described it as ghosts returning, and it tastes like cooked apples in the best way, and it's really sophisticated. It is super smooth. It's incredible. But if you're not a spirit drinker, then try the Somerset Pomona first. The Somerset Pomona is a fail-safe. People love it. Try it with cheese, drink it like a port, drink it like a pudding wine. It's juicy, it's all about the apple, and it's really easy for anyone to drink and understand. You'll have a little slice of our magic orchards here. It's delicious. So the market for Somerset Cider Brandy in the UK didn't exist. There was none when we started. The vodkas on the market that you think of now as being the cheaper vodkas, they were the luxury vodkas. And it was a very, very different thing. There was no artisan distilleries. There was just big industrial gin and big industrial whiskey distilleries. And we've seen a massive revolution in the past 20 years of small distilleries popping up. The laws have become much, much more relaxed. Julian fought for many years for the licenses for these ladies. But now you've got huge innovation, which is really exciting. I think there's a lot of white spirits that are being produced. I think you have to be slightly bananas to make a aged brown spirit because it takes so incredibly long. I think our stock rotation is 20 years, and when we're growing the orchards, we're looking at 20 years before we've got a good harvest. So really we're looking at a 40-year planning ahead, which is great, and that's what we intend to carry on doing, growing very slowly as we can replant orchards. And there's lots to be said about all this new innovation in the cider world, and hopefully that will continue. Hopefully people will continue to be a bit mad and take a punt on the future and products that they might not be able to sell for 10 or 15 years because it's completely rewarding when you do, and it's the total epitome of slow food. So everything we do here is slow, and that's the way really farming should be, and this whole process should be. There's no corners cut. It is an artisan product, and that's the only way that you can really make your land speak through your alcohol.